name is Adam22, and I own No Jumper and On Some Shit. Wow, so the simplified, easy version of my come up is that in 2006, right around the same time that all the hip-hop blogs like Nah Right and Two Dope Boys, they all started popping up. I saw all that, and I was a rap fan, but I also was like a BMX fan. I've been riding BMX since I was like 13. I've been in it for about 10 years at that point, so I just saw the whole blog thing taking off, and I said, you know what, I could do that, but for BMX. So I just sort of ran with that formula. I started a website called thecomeup.com. Pretty quickly became the biggest and really in a lot of ways like the first BMX blog, and it really took off from there. Then I did that for about 8, 9, 10 years. I still own it, but at a certain point I started doing podcasts, and that started taking off right from the very beginning. My buddy Xavier Wolf, who's the only rapper that I was friends with at that time, he just a couple of years ago, he let me be his first interview. I did a pretty good job, I'd like to think, and then Puya hit me up from there and just sort of got the ball rolling. All of a sudden, I was doing a podcast that was primarily focused around rap. On Some Shit is a clothing brand that started in 2009, and we have a store on Melrose. We had a store downtown for 3 years. We were on Melrose for about 6 months, and we sell our own clothes. We sell bikes. We sell bike parts. We sell No Jumper accessories and clothing, everything like that. And then I do the podcast out back, and we film rap videos back there and do all kinds of other stuff. The reason why I got into podcasting was really just because I'd been doing the blogging thing in the BMX world for a long time, and it just sort of started to feel kind of bored with copy and pasting embed codes and writing little descriptions. And I was listening to Joe Rogan, and I started to listen to Combat Jack. I started to listen to Juan Epstein, Rosenberg, and Cypher Sounds, and I just sort of I was enjoying all that content, and then at a certain point, I'm friends with Xavier Wolf, I'm friends with Bones and Chris Travis, and a bunch of guys in LA who were popping off in the underground, and it just sort of started to occur to me, there's nobody really doing any kind of cool media content, so I just decided to hop on it, and it wasn't really my focus to be like a rap podcast. I just wanted to do a general podcast, but all the rap stuff just started hitting and doing better and better, and I just kept getting more opportunities, and I've just sort of been rolling with it ever since. I think the biggest thing that set off No Jumper was when we did the XXXTENTACION interview super early, like a year and a half ago or something. And at that time, I think he had like 16,000 SoundCloud followers, and now he has like a couple million or something. So it was kind of like when he blew up while he was in jail, he wasn't really around to explain it for the media and stuff. So then they all started coming to me. All the record labels started coming to me, basically just trying to figure out like what the hell is going on in the scene and stuff. And so that sort of helped me to gain a little bit more notoriety too, I guess, just because I was so close to the source at that point. When I met X, he was just so magnetic and he just had so much character. And I mean, it's just the way he interacted with me at that time, like really impressed me. The way he was in the interview was just like, wow, this guy could just totally be a star. But I mean, I'll be the first to admit that at that time, I didn't fully understand the music. Like, I liked his music, but then I remember afterwards, like over the course of the next couple of months, that I would just keep finding myself going back to it over and over. So then by the time his stuff really blew up when he was in jail, like he had already started to like cement himself in my consciousness, and like I was just waiting for him to get out of jail, and then the fans just started to really pick up on it while he was in jail, and it blew my mind, because to see somebody blow up that I had interviewed while they were still locked up was just mind-blowing. But I mean, I don't know, it's weird. I have like a very organic relationship with a lot of these kids. Like, a lot of people, they're like, oh, like, why the fuck you hang out with Lil Pump? He's 17. It's like, Lil Pump's just a kid I know. Like, it doesn't feel any different than all the 17-year-old BMX riders that come hang out at my shop that I see every day and stuff. Lil Pump's just a little wackier, a little bit more famous, but I mean, it's whatever to me. I just kind of got lucky in the sense that Xavier Wolf, Bones, guys like that, they were still pretty small. They were still playing like warehouse shows to like 400 or 500 kids, which to me at the time, I didn't have any sort of like music industry experience or whatever besides just going to shows. I was like really taken aback by it, because I grew up going to hardcore shows and punk shows and everything too. So I just saw them doing so good, like filling up 400, 500 person venues, crazy moshing, and it was just kind of like, oh, this is like a side of rap music that doesn't just appeal to me sonically, but also aesthetically. Like, I was just looking at it from the perspective of a BMX kid or a skate kid, and I was like, this is like exactly what those kids want at this point. They want stuff that's really raw, underground. They don't really want to hear dudes talking about their jewelry, stuff like that. So like, to me, that initial spark of just really hitting it off with the Seshala Water Boys, that was the big thing for me. And then the only reason why I even got in touch with them, I just like was looking for music to use in a video. I heard Bones. I thought it was awesome. I'm like, oh, I could probably like get this cleared so I could use it in a BMX video. I hit up his brother, Elliot. Elliot was like, yeah, it's cool. And then he ended up bringing him through the store. They ended up shooting the video for We Don't Believe You in the store, which got like 4 million views or something like that. And then it was just very, I don't know, it was just a very natural transition. So to me, it's like, I don't really look at it being that different when I was doing BMX interviews or I'm doing rap interviews. It was all just sort of a natural transition. I mean, over the course of the past couple of years, I've really had to sort of like find ways to segment up my time because I'm doing so many roles at the same time, and it can be really hard to go from like doing 4 different meetings throughout the day and posting a BMX video on the site and then going straight into an interview with a rapper. So it just means that I have to be a little bit more confident in my team, the people around me, just putting people in the right position to make content on the BMX side of things or be able to make the clothing, since I can't be directly 100% involved with making sure the production's on point for everything. I got a lot of different employees. Shout out Alfredo and Kim and Phil and everybody, but I basically just, it can be really, really hard, but at the same time, I mean, I work like every minute of the day. I don't really have any like time for anything else. I'm not really interested in anything else. I just want to make this shit pop, so it's easy for me. To prepare for an interview, usually it'll take me maybe like 4 to 8 hours. So that's why when people ask me for interviews all willy-nilly thinking they're gonna get an interview like that day, I'm just like, God, you got me fucked up. Like, I need time to prepare for this. Like, especially when it can be very challenging to interview somebody who doesn't even have a mixtape out, because they might be a really interesting kid, but you don't know what the fuck to ask them about besides the obvious stuff because you don't have any information about them. So what I always try to do, I just like set aside hours in the day that I'll just, listen to their music over and over, and I try to just turn my phone off, get rid of all the distractions, and just try to really get myself in that zone of thinking like, what do people want to hear Rico Reckless talk about? What do people want to hear Mozzie talk about? Like, what is the interesting part about Mozzie? What's the most interesting first question that I could ask that'll actually draw people in, but then once I get in there too, it's like, a lot of times I don't even end up looking at the questions, because if you're in there with a really great conversationalist, like I would consider Mozzie a great conversationalist. I mean, the only reason I have notes at that point is just to remember the little details. Oh, you beefed with this guy. Maybe we should talk about that, stuff like that. I don't really, I don't know. I love the research process almost as much as I love doing the interview or getting the reaction from the interview, because like I just did the Wyclef interview, and it was like I loved having an excuse to spend, like 3 days straight listening to nothing but Wyclef and the Fugees and stuff, because I wouldn't, I listened to that stuff growing up, but I wouldn't necessarily have had a reason to revisit it. But I mean, that's my favorite thing, is just to completely get a chance to just study up on something and just reacquaint myself with some great music, Yeah. Not to mention the other content. Like I watched him on Nori's Drink Champs podcast for like 2 hours, and that was one of the best podcasts I ever seen. I probably wouldn't ever watch that if I wasn't doing the interview myself. So, I mean, I'm all about learning, and the podcast has always just been a vehicle for me just learning some shit. I mean, the craziest thing for me is that the 2 biggest podcasts are X and Suicide Boys, and both of those interviews, I felt like I was doing those interviews like 100% for the culture. Like, oh, these are young dudes that I think are talented, that I want to give them a shot. Absolutely no clue that they would have blown up to the point they are, because the music was super dope, but that does not always guarantee that the shit is going to pop off. Like Suicide Boys, to me, when I first met them, they were just dudes who were like hanging out backstage at a Seshala Water Boys show, and met them, thought they were cool. When I got around to doing the interview, their fan base had already started to go crazy, like at the very beginning, but you never know how big it's going to go. Or with X, same thing. Like, I liked both of their music a lot, and I thought that they seemed like cool people. I was happy to have a conversation with them. But did I know that they were going to go viral like that or blow up? No way. And that is a big part of what makes it so fun, is to think that like maybe this year I'm going to do 100 interviews, and maybe there's going to be 2 or 3 guys who all of a sudden are platinum or they're like world famous, and you never know. And it's just, the more people that I get to give a chance, the more chances I have to be successful, but also the more chances I have to help some person out. So it's like I'm incentivized to make content that could help some kid out. And that's like what I really like about my job, is like I don't, if I were to go get a super famous person's interview, it's like it's not really, it's good, but it's not like I have a huge incentive to do that. But if I get the next hot kid, like somehow I find a rapper that I'm really excited about and I'm right, that's all the way good for No Jumper. And I just listen to a lot of rap music. I pay attention to the comments. It's like my fans will, if there's a rapper who has any sort of heat, like my fans are gonna let me know in the comments. And also I do the live stream thing where I'm sitting there and we'll listen to kids' songs for 20 or 30 bucks. They can play their song and have a couple thousand people in the chat hear their song. So it's like nowadays it feels like I find out about an insane amount of good stuff there because like a lot of these kids, they want to go viral or they know that they have some talent. So they're like, oh, how can I get a couple thousand people to see it? Oh, maybe I'll just like donate while Adam's on live stream, he'll play it. And if it is good, it's like I've seen songs explode like that recently just because if it is good, those couple thousand people who see it, they might actually be enough to like get it going, you know, which is crazy. Damn, there's so many funny podcast moments, but one thing that stands out is I was interviewing this this sort of Instagram model named Madzilla. She's super cool, but she opened a bottle of champagne and ended up shooting so high that it like we had a printer in the corner like to print out our orders, and the champagne shot so far that it landed all over the printer. With the printer was fine, but that was pretty funny. I remember, or just the other day, I was interviewing the Cuff Boys, this kid Cameron, who has like a YouTube channel, the Mom Reacts kid, and he had this dude, Landon Cube, with him, who's a up-and-coming singer, who's in a lot of his videos, and the cat just hopped on the table and just decided to beat the shit out of Landon, and that was fucking unbelievably funny too. Like for no reason, the cat just decides to fuck up this dude Landon. I was really excited for the Riff Raff interview, and I was so excited that I even got like a couple co-hosts, my friend Lil House Phone, this girl Brittany I'm friends with, and then my friend Chris Long showed up and just rolled a huge blunt and gave it to Riff Raff. And then I felt like he got kind of like paranoid. He got kind of weirded out by there being a bunch of co-hosts. And it was just basically a complete and total disaster. And the only reason it ended up kind of okay was because we continued to sit there for like another 45 minutes after the interview and talk about how weird and bad the interview was. So it's like we did this autopsy of the bad interview like as part of the interview. And I thought that that was like a pretty good breakthrough. It's not like we've done that since, but I was, you know, to be honest, I wasn't that surprised, and especially because like when I went to interview Riff Raff, I had all these questions written about like the music he put out in like 2011 and 2012 because I'm like an actual fan, and like his manager kind of told me right away like, oh, he doesn't like to talk about the past. I'm like, well, what the fuck are we talking about then? Like we can't talk about what's happening right now. Like the present is just this moment. So that was a little weird, but all's well that ends well. I love an interview like, you know, with a rapper that I just believe is going to blow up. So it's like the X interview, the Suicide Boys interview, the Lil Yachty interview. I mean, those are all, they stand out to me a lot as my favorites for that reason. But then, I mean, I really do like the ones where I end up just having like a really great conversation. Like I interviewed this author, Ryan Holiday, that I actually became pretty good friends with. I interviewed Charlemagne, and I really liked my conversation with Anthony Fantano, just talking about music in general. And I don't know, I have a real affection for like the 3-hour introspective deep podcasts, which are like a completely different category than the 18-year-old rapper interviews, because a lot of times the 18-year-old rapper, it's like I'm just trying to flesh out who they are. Whereas like if I'm sitting there with, you know, Anthony Fantano, he's my age, and we're just gonna sit there for 3.5 hours and just talk about music, talk about our lives, blah, blah, blah. And, yeah, and that's super fun to me too. That's like different sides of the same coin though, because, you know, it's very rare that you find an 18 or 19-year-old who's a great conversationalist, and that was what tripped me out about X, is that he just, it was unreal how good and how easy it was for him to just flow on camera, which is very rare. And if you find an 18 or 19-year-old kid that is like an expert interviewee, you should probably keep an eye on them, because that's usually a pretty good sign that they're going to do well. Lil Pump, I was on vacation with my parents last year, back in December, and one night I just decided to go to a show, and I think it was like Young Simi, Ski Mask, Lil Pump, and I just went, and Lil Pump was like at the bottom of the bill because he had just came out. I think he had like 5,000 followers, but the crowd was really enjoying him, and like me and him just ended up, I was hanging out with like some of the older dudes that he was kicking it with, his managers and stuff at the time, and we just ended up going to some party at Bruno's house and just hanging out all night, and me and Pump just got along super good, even though he was a 16-year-old kid and I'm a 33-year-old man. But I mean, we just got along good. And then him and SMOKEPURPP ended up being the first people that we took on tour with No Jumper, and that whole tour was just unreal. The other main thing I always think of with Lil Pump is just hearing from the back of the van, like, yo, Adam, can we stop and get backwoods? Like every 30 minutes, like, I swear to God, he buys packs of backwoods and just like dumps them on the ground and like loses them right away, because he buys a new pack of backwoods like literally every like 30 minutes. And I don't know, man. Lil Pump, he's a character. I mean, he's one of the best people I met in the rap game. Like people think he's a joke. People try to paint him as if his music ain't popping. Like he's one of the best dudes I know in the game, and his music, like, it just constantly, like, everything he puts out is so good. It's like an event when he puts a song out. I don't even necessarily understand why, but when he just put Gucci Gang out, it was like fucking, I don't know, it's like the Olympics or something. I'm really excited about SMOKEPURPP's album because I was just in the studio with him listening to that whole thing, and it's just unreal, and I feel like it's just gonna surpass a lot of expectations of the people he's being compared against. I think he's a lot better than a lot of the people he's being compared against, so I'm very excited for the SMOKEPURPP album, to be honest. I think that every podcast I do is just a constant process of just evaluating, and it's not like I listen to the podcast afterwards. I just don't have time for that, but it's just, I constantly feel like I'm just learning and growing and just figuring out what's interesting, different conversational techniques. I listen to so many other podcasts too, like every week. Like I probably listen to like at least like 10 other people's podcasts, and like, I'm always trying to learn, always trying to grow, always trying to figure out what I could do better with the whole interview process. So, I sat there the other day and listened to somebody's interview before I interviewed him, and the interviewer like spent like the first 40 minutes of the interview talking about their childhood, and there was just a point where I'm like, this is way too deep. Like, this is terrible. Like, nobody wants to know this much about your dad. Like, and so that, like, every little observation about somebody else's podcast could just be like a little tiny breakthrough for me. It's like, oh, you need to be very careful with how much you talk about their childhood because it gets fucking boring. And I just, sort of landed on that, and just I don't know. It's like I have a very critical mind, and I criticize the fuck out of my own content as I'm doing it. I'm ripping myself apart for little things in it as it's happening. So it's like, for me, the process of just evaluating what I'm doing is just a nonstop thing. First rap I was into was like Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, I think in like 91, 92. That was what really got me off the porch in a sense. Like I was just watching those videos on MTV and just listening to them on the radio, recording them onto tapes and just trying to figure it out. I was really intrigued by the fact that Coolio and Snoop Dogg were both wearing blue rags. I was like, damn, these guys know each other? That's cool. I don't know. And I just kept like getting deeper and deeper from there. Once I discovered Wu-Tang and Tupac and Biggie, it just kept getting worse. And then in high school, I like took like a 1-year hiatus from rap because I was so into like Korn and Limp Bizkit and stuff that I was 13 and I just, got full-fledged into that. And then at a certain point, I just sort of recoiled from that. And I was like, no, like this stuff is okay, but I really, really, really like Jay-Z. I need to go make sure that I'm aware of what Jay-Z's doing right now. And it just, over the years, it just kept getting worse and worse. And I got, all of a sudden I got a subscription to The Source and XXL, and my rap knowledge was just, it's just been this weird addictive obsession since I was a kid. And like I remember, like a huge thing for me was when Jay and Nas beefed, just because, I don't know, there's just something about them going at it and how good both of those diss tracks were that it just endeared me to rap so much more. I think I was in like 10th or 11th grade when that happened, and it just blew my mind. And like all of a sudden then G-Unit came out, Dipset came out, and all of a sudden I was just fully submerged in everything. And then, getting even deeper into the underground, once I moved to LA, that was a very big part of it too. So I don't know, it's just been a constant process. I got into Green Day, I think in 1994, and that was like when I first started to get into punk. And then over time, I've always been interested in metal and hardcore, and there's always been select bands that I got really into for a while. Like I was a ridiculous Blood for Blood fan my whole life. I was a huge Earth Crisis fan. I was a ridiculous Strife fan, and just a lot of different bands that just did it for me. Youth of Today and Chain of Strength and all this old straight edge stuff that I just love. But nowadays, I got to be honest, my musical interests pretty much have been narrowed down to like primarily rap. I'm interested in pop music. I'm interested in R&B to a certain extent. Like if Beyonce puts out an album, I'm listening to the album basically as a participant in the culture. But is that the music that I want to listen to in my car by myself? No, but I'm just interested in different subcultures and different worlds and just trying to make sense of everything. So basically, my opinion is that rap has become so big and so universal that now all other forms of music are basically occurring under the idea of hip-hop. So it's like you have something like the Suicide Boys or X or Lil Pump or Ghostmane, and you look at them and it's like their fan base are kids who probably would have been into alternative rock or hardcore or punk at a certain point, but now those same values and aesthetic concerns that they used to find in hardcore or in punk is like, that's all now being communicated very effectively through rap, I think. And when you see other genres sort of falling by the wayside, like indie rock and stuff, I think it's because, if you like Taking Back Sunday or Blink-182 like I did in 2002, nowadays it's like you could pretty much get what you wanted from that music out of Lil Peep, out of Lil Tracy. There's just, I don't know, there's just so many different lanes available in hip hop, and hip hop is so big. And if you really think about it, like the boundaries of what it is to be hip hop are so loose and so non-conforming that when you listen to Lil Peep, it's like, in what way is this in any way related to, like, you know, Grandmaster Flash? Like, there's no connection. There's very little connection. It's a beat, and it's a guy using his voice over the beat. But I mean, that I think is the thing that has made rap so powerful, is that it's so expansive that nobody's asking to be left out, that Lil Peep can essentially leave behind every single thing related to the roots of hip-hop and still be considered hip-hop. Whereas I grew up listening to hardcore, and as soon as you sped that shit up a little bit, you added a few too many breakdowns, whatever, your metal or your moshcore, whatever, they would always try to put you in different genres. Rap is great because there are very few genres. And now we're starting to see people talk about mumble rap, people talk about emo rap, sort of like necessary explainers for certain types of content. But I think rap's expansiveness, much to the chagrin of certain people in the industry who want to see rap stay traditional, that's what has made rap so big, is that it is infinitely, I don't know. I mean, I can't say that rap is going to be the biggest thing forever, but it seems like for at least the 10 years coming, we should be safe. I mean, my whole thing with hip-hop is that elitism is fucking whack, and that hip-hop is about the kids, and that if you are a 35-year-old guy who's still involved in rap, that's great, that's awesome, but you really don't have any business writing off Lil Pump as a musician, because he is, at 16, regardless of if his values include, you know, technical lyricism. Like, he is the heart of hip hop. He's a kid who's expressing himself. He's a kid who came from nothing, and he's making something out of himself by telling his story, regardless of how specifically he feels the need to tell that story at this point in his life. And that's what I'm in love with, is watching young people tell their story through rap music. And to me, it's like, I'm so glad that I never became the kind of 33-year-old that look down on a kid for doing his thing, you know, and I don't know why I never like hit that wall. I think a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that I've never really had a job since I was real young. I never really had to conform. To me, rap is like infinitely expansive. I want to know what Lil Pump's doing. And also, this is the other thing, is that I think I realized this for the first time when Katie Got Bands came out. It's like Chief Keef comes out, and then you got Lil Durk, you got Fredo, all these dudes. And then you got the girls who start coming out of the Chicago scene too. You got Sasha Go Hard, you got Katie Got Bands. I'm listening to Sasha and Katie, and I'm thinking, like, I fucking love this, even though I actually don't really give a shit about this music, you know? Like, I love rap enough that I was obsessed with Katie Got Bands for a few weeks, even though I really didn't care about the music. But it just made me so happy to see a young girl who was that confident and really trying to do her thing and doing something completely different. And that just made me so happy. And that's when I realized, like, I love the entirety of this. Like, it's not just about the music. It's not just about the story. It's everything all together, you know? Like, my opinion is that, and I hope that if there's any kind of influence I could have on the overall hip-hop media landscape, it's like, you really aren't shit as a hip-hop media company unless you're giving opportunities to up-and-coming artists. And it's not like you have to base the entirety of what you do around that. Like, obviously, I understand that, like, a Drake thing or a Nicki Minaj thing is really what's going to keep the lights on. But I mean, if you don't take chances, if you don't find ways to deal with up-and-coming artists, to give people a chance, I mean, then you just basically are not contributing to the culture. And like, that's the number one complaint that you'll hear about like New York radios. Like, they just don't provide enough opportunities for young artists. And it's like, I understand that their business isn't based around providing opportunities for new artists, but it should be expected, and there should be an expectation of media companies within hip-hop that they are looking to the future and looking to what young people are doing. Because if you start to ignore the new wave, like that is what opened the lane for me to get in here, is the fact that a lot of mainstream media companies were ignoring a lot of the stuff that was blowing up on an underground level. And I think that there's a big responsibility from people. And I think that that's why I get respect. When I talk to Peter Rosenberg, that's why he gives me respect, is because he's like, yo, I'm older, I'm involved in a lot of outside of hip-hop stuff, but I love the fact that you're actually doubling down on the underground shit. And like, to get respect from him for that really, really felt good. I mean, I think drugs and everything has always been big in rap, or big in youth culture in general. It's just sort of, we've seen like people getting more and more honest about everything from, you know, I mean, you had somebody like BG who was dealing with like crazy struggles with addiction his entire career. And if you really paid attention, Prodigy is another example. Like, these are dudes who are I mean, I'm not even going to say what they were doing, but they were doing very serious, hard drugs for the entirety of their career. But they would only sort of allude to it in their songs, and they wouldn't really be like proudly open about it. You know, Lil Pump and SMOKEPURPP are kind of doing something a little different because they are talking about doing opiates on a level that is, I would agree, kind of dangerous. Like there's kids who see this stuff and don't understand the full dangers of doing drugs, but at the same time, I mean, you have to like ride that in-between point where people are being honest about what they're doing, and then you also want to, like, to some extent be able to offer an intelligent perspective on the long-term ramifications of doing drugs. So for me, it's like I have to ride that too, because I mean, I'm an adult who has fucked around with drugs my whole life, never really felt like I had an addiction problem with it or whatever, but I mean, I'll still go out and party. I fucking smoke weed all the time. So it's like, even for me, it's like I have to be able to sit here and say, yeah, I smoke backwoods every day, and then also be able to say, hey, like, if you're a 16-year-old kid and you're in high school, you probably shouldn't be smoking backwoods every day. You should probably just fucking chill out with that shit and go to college and like try to make something out of yourself, which, I mean, it's tough to tell a kid, hey, do as I say, not as I do, but at the end of the day, you got to do it. So, I mean, I do worry. Like, I don't worry about the effect that Lil Pump's music has on other kids. I worry about Lil Pump, period, because I just don't want to see him end up in a bad situation. But at the same time, it's like you can't really, I got a lot of people in my life who are drug addicts, and I mean, I've learned the hard way that you can't make them stop. You gotta try to like wait till they're ready, try to lead them in the right direction. And I mean, I would be there for any of my friends. I have a lot of friends in the rap industry who have had to stop doing drugs, and I've seen a crazy good influence on them with that. All I can do is kind of try to create an environment of transparency and openness where we have honest conversations about stuff like drugs. Like, I'm never going to sit there in a conversation on the podcast and be like, man, Xanax is the fucking best, without also being like, hey, there's a lot of bad things that come along with that you need to be aware of, you know? At a certain point with the podcast, we wanted to start doing tours, and I mean, Lil Pump and SMOKEPURPP were the first one. We did another one with, I don't know, Jeffrey and Chapo and DJ Lucas. We got another one coming up that's actually a charity type thing, which I'm really, really excited about. And I don't know, it's just, I wanted to get into the space of doing events and doing tours and stuff like that. And we've experimented with a few different business models in terms of me just going along on tour as sort of like a opening act or just promotion or media or whatever. We've messed with doing the entire tours ourselves. For me, it's like I'm just trying to kind of take the overall flow or the overall environment of No Jumper and the fan base and be able to just throw cool events for people. So, you know, I don't road manage anyone. I don't manage anybody. The whole thing with me managing X was basically a troll by me and X that a lot of people fell for. I can't call it 100% a troll because, you know, I was willing to give it a shot, but I never really thought it was going to be anything too serious, and I don't think he did either. I think he just thought it would be a fun thing to say on Twitter. So, I don't know. I have been open to that. I've thought about it, and I'm like, damn, like, maybe I should tell Lil Pump I want to co-manage him, but I don't know. I mean, it's just like, for me, I get off on fucking with a lot of different people, like doing the interviews and stuff, and I don't really want to have to like spend all day focused on one rapper, even if that was going to be the thing that would make more money or something in the long term. I would rather just do a lot of different content with a lot of different people rather than just focus all on one dude. I mean, I work with labels. I have great relationships with a bunch of different labels. They bring me artists sometimes that they think I'd be interested in, and sometimes I'll tell them, no, this is horrible, you're crazy, I'm never gonna interview this guy. Sometimes I tell them, yeah, this guy's dope, send him to me, I wanna meet him. It's all over the place, and you know, I might, by the time you see this, I might have a more official label situation. There might be a lot more interesting things happening in the future, but I don't know. There's no contract signed just yet, so. Yeah, it's interesting. 5-10 years from now, I don't know, 38 to 43. I don't know. I mean, to be honest though, the one thing that makes me really happy is that I know if I was still doing the exact same thing I'm doing right now 5 years from now, that I would still be really happy with it. So that's why I landed on podcasting, is because I saw it as something that would give me a completely expansive way to continue to learn and progress and actually be able to make some sort of a business out of it. So I have all kinds of wild ideas, but all I'm really concerned with is the fact that I'm able to do this and I'm able to keep doing this and making this as big as possible. If I had to do podcasts every day until I died, I'd be pretty cool with that. So the one thing I've really landed on is that you just have to look yourself in the mirror at some point and be like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And it's like, at a certain point, I realized, oh, I don't want to be a person who's gossiping about rappers or talking shit about rappers. I just want to be a person that helps rappers and gives them a chance. So as soon as I realized that, I felt very free. I'm like, oh, wait, so if somebody gets arrested or somebody beats up their girlfriend or whatever, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm just going to, focus on helping people out when they get into when I believe in their talents, and I'm just gonna ignore all the other shit. So, you know, I'm Mr. No Comment when it comes to all the bullshit that some of these guys get into, because I just want to be on the positive side of things. And anytime anybody tries to drag me into some negative shit, I'm just like, hey, leave me out of it. I just want to help people.